useful comments. I just would like to turn to you in the audience and see if you have any few clarification questions on the presentation. As you know, there will be a comments and questions session later. So it's just if you have any question related to any slides or anything that Pat can just clarify before we move on. So if I see any hand now, everything is perfectly clear. Good work, Pat. Oh yeah. Right, so then I think we just move on and we welcome, as Pat said, and the three wise men up on the stage. So please welcome up the panel and take your seats. And while they're taking their seats, I just would like to say again that the questions and comment session is coming after they've given their bright comments, hopefully. But if you have any questions or comments already now that you would like to write down on a piece of paper, please do it now, and you can wave with it, or if you need a piece of paper, I have my colleagues running around with the microphones that can give you a piece of paper, and then you write it down instead of asking it in front of all the people later. So then I'll make sure to read it and get some answer from the panel. Okay, so I'm very eager to hear the comments from the panel here. First, we have Per Fredrik Faro, who's the director of the NICFI Secretariat, based at the Ministry of Climate and Environment. He has been heading this initiative for quite some time now, since the start, so he should be able to give some reflections on the report, the work that has been done, and maybe some thoughts about the future. Then we have Eva Jørgensen, who's the policy director at NORAD's Department for Climate, Energy and Environment. He's been around for a while as well, and is very knowledgeable in the forest and development issues. And then we have on the corner Arild Angelsen, who's a professor with his major in economics, and he's from the Norwegian University of Life Science, and he's one of the key researchers, I must say, within the red science world. So first of all, I would like to hand over the word to Per Fredrik Faro. Please come up and give your remarks.
Thank you for that, and thank you for NORAD for hosting this. I'm sure it will be a very useful discussion. It's already been a very useful introduction. First, I would like to thank Pat and his team. It is quite a traumatic experience to be evaluated. You are at the mercy of some unknown factor, and you never know. They could be quite nasty-minded, you never know. But this one was very interesting. It's not a given that you meet evaluators with this kind of willingness to be fair-minded and find the balance, as Pat put it in his introduction. It's been a very interesting, sometimes very challenging process, but it certainly had a lot of learning for us. I must have been asked about 100 times the last 24 hours how I feel about this evaluation, and my response today has been that, well, the Norwegian daily Nationen ran the following headline, "No slaughter of NICFI," and from them that's actually quite a compliment, so I'm happy. More seriously, 3 points. First of all, we think it's a really good evaluation, and that's not just because it concludes that we have done reasonably well in reaching the goals set for us by Parliament, but also because where there is criticism, it's constructive, it's intelligent, and it's useful for the way forward. So highly appreciated. I should mention that we have had commissioned another report, a Lash Report by former WRI President Jonathan Lash. I'm only mentioning it because it mainly overlaps with the key conclusions of Pat's and his team's reports. So we feel there is substantial firmness in what we now have to build on going forward. I think to me, one of the most interesting and encouraging things is that both reports have quite a strong emphasis on the effectiveness of our large bilateral pay-for-performance bets, which is not obvious. It was not obvious when those bets were made. And they were bets. The idea that you could get catalyzed support, transformational change in countries of considerable size and with immense forest areas by making an upfront offer to pay for results was not at all obvious at the time. And I think we are getting the message from both the NORAD evaluation and the Lash evaluation that bet, while far from perfect, still has paid off and has pointed the way to an approach that we should build on going forward. Two words on that I think need to be core to looking at this, and which I think both these reports reflect very intelligently, but that are not obvious and were not obvious when we started out. And that is the fundamental fact that protecting forests is a public policy issue. Outsiders can help, but tropical forest country governments will fix this or not. Thus, our only impact is through our ability to empower the reformers in those countries to implement and get political consensus around the necessary public policies. And to do that, we need to be credible, constructive, predictable partners. They must own it. We must be hands-off in our approach, but clear on our goals. We can provide support on a request, but we should not and cannot detail programs and projects. That is not our role. Second point, which pertains to a couple of the weaknesses that this evaluation points out, and which we agree with, but we still want to remind ourselves what we were tasked to do, what NICFI was tasked to do. And that explains those two sets of activities which have considerable weaknesses. It does not explain the weaknesses, but it does explain the engagement. The first goal of NICFI was to support efforts to get REDD+ into a UN climate change regime. It is today part of the UN climate change regime. In fact, it's one of the most advanced parts of the UNFCCC rule set. And it's quite obvious that for that to be achieved, we needed to create global consensus. And you do not create global consensus on your own. That happens in multilateral settings. So we had to address this multilaterally in all the suitable forums we could find. That was not a choice. It was not an option not to do that. Thus, we have worked with the UN system, which has unique normative credibility. We have worked through the World Bank and the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility because that was the established forum. It was simply not an option to be there. Even so, we very much agree on the weaknesses in these initiatives. They need to be remedied, and we'll continue to work as aggressively as we can to remedy them. And we will most likely, as I think the evaluation recommends, consider our level of support depending on what kind of progress is made. But we need to continue our unilateral efforts. The other element that draws some criticism, fairly, is the challenging countries, as one might call them. I'll spend a little bit of time on Guyana, because why did we go there at all? The Guyanese claimed the only Norwegian that had ever been there before we came was one that had rowed from Portugal. Uncertain on what his motivation was for that. Certainly not REDD+. So it was terra incognita. But the basic fact was that to build a global regime on REDD+, we had to address the roughly quarter of remaining tropical forests that are to be found in HFLD countries. HFLD countries, high forest cover, low deforestation countries, are generally challenging to work with. There's a reason why they are HFLDs. And Guyana was one place where we had a lot of forest, an appealing vision of low carbon development, strong political ownership at the top, and this is important, it was actually small enough that it was reasonable to assume that our pay-for-performance funding could actually make a real economic incentive. So that was the background for the choice. It's been challenging, it continues to be challenging, and we will certainly follow the advice of really looking hard at the weaknesses in that parliament, in that collaboration going forward. At the same time, I think we would emphasize that we're very happy that the report also emphasizes the positive developments in Guyana, and there are a few. Among others, the quite exceptional delivery of a very, very impressive MRV system in just a few years, which addresses what just a decade ago was a belief that this couldn't really be done. That is now, even in a country with as many challenges as Guyana, the ability to do that has been demonstrated, and that's excellent. We have also achieved progress in the Guyana Red Investment Fund, though I think our Guyanese colleagues would be the first to agree that that progress is too slow. My third point is general, that is the advice of the evaluation is very good, and I'm quite sure we will take most of it on board, if not all. Our minister has been very clear yesterday that we will take this very seriously, and we will chart a revised course for NICFI on, among other things, the basis of the plenty of useful advice of this report. Some advice comes out quite clearly, and much of that advice is also supported by the Lash Report. Just mention a few things that looks clear. One is that, and I think this is right, and Pat will, I'm sure, correct me, but I do believe that the evaluation is saying that mainly we should stay the course, and it's quite crucial that we stay the course. Of course, the Norwegian Parliament has already decided that there will be NICFI funding at current levels until 2020, and that's a quite admirable commitment from our Parliament, I think. Second, we should adjust to a new reality through adjusted focus and added elements, and we should write out in one integrated document our theory of change, including those new aspects of what we do. Third, certain concrete measures stand out. We should continue results-based partnerships approach to bilateral initiatives. We should review those partnerships where progress has been less than satisfactory. We should establish a few new results-based bilaterals with countries that demonstrate real will and ability to deliver. As the report puts it, we should accept that the field has become stretched out and work with those that are delivering but not yet receiving much finance. Another one is that we should probably be more distinct in our policy asks in those bilateral partnerships, early phases, to ensure the measurability of progress before we get to the point where we can actually pay for tons. That's a very clear recommendation, I think, in both reports. We should continue and probably strengthen further the civil society program. And we should be working more proactively with the responsible private sector that have committed to deforestation-free supply chains. We should work even more proactively with other serious donors. UK and Germany are clearly key in this connection. And lastly, we should become better communicators, which after this introduction you will understand why it is called for. So basically, we will be working on fleshing this out. The NORAD evaluation, the Lash Report, and plenty of other analysis provides an excellent basis. We really do not think it's now a question of more analytics and more research, but about synthesizing the insights making the trade-offs, adjusting our course where needed, and get on with the work. It is as crucial as ever. I know you all know that, or you wouldn't have been here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Per Fredrik. Very clear and to the point, as communication should be then. Then we have Ivar Jørgensen. No further ado, just come up and give your words.
Thank you very much. And I would like to say that from NORAD's side, we find it extremely exciting to be a part of this big program. And we find the report as very good and very rewarding after many years of work in this complex program. And I would like to congratulate the team with the job well done. This is indeed a very valuable contribution to the work of NORAD also, because it is a part of the quality assurance, the overall quality assurance system that we are implementing for projects like this. The report gives very important inputs to the discussion on how we prioritize, how we keep on the work, while of course there are elements of the report where we would have wished to see more in-depth analysis to substantiate the conclusions of the report. But I'd like to say overall that we are quite proud to be part of a program that receives such positive evaluation. The program stands out as a quite successful initiative, and it is quoted as a bold initiative. It has nothing to do with the thin hair of myself or certain members of the evaluation team, but it is quoted as a highly innovative and with an ability to adapt and respond quickly to changing circumstances. NORAD's role in this, as you have heard, is to organize independent evaluations, but also to manage a large part of the funds of the Climate and Forest Initiative and provide quality assurance. We give advice to the Ministry of Climate and Environment and the involved embassies on legal matters, technical matters related to the initiative. We are also particularly focused on the development effects of the initiative. And NORAD manages the huge chunk of funds that is being spent by civil society. And we're very happy to see that in this report, the contributions through civil society are regarded as cornerstones to the process of developing RED at the global level, national level, but also we see that civil society is key to implementing RED at the local, subnational and local level, which is where the real changes have to take place in order for forest management to be changed. We also see the focus that has been on research as important, and in particular assisting RED countries in developing their own research capacity. I think this also will be important in the future of the program. The evaluation report points to a number of good examples where the initiative has contributed to good development processes. This is very encouraging indeed. The Auditor General of Norway has criticized the initiative for a lack of focus on development results. I think these results have been there all along, but the increased focus has brought them more to the surface. It is important to remember that reducing deforestation depends on good development results and vice versa. The two are intertwined and cannot be separated. One of the examples of development effects is the processes regarding land rights, land tenure. This is important for RED, but it's also very important for the development of livelihoods of the concerned communities. Research and experience shows that forests managed by local people generally are in a better state than other forests. The report also notes contributions to good governance, which we think is extremely important as a basis for developing RED in the countries. The program has supported a number of pilot programs in various countries, and we see a lot of knowledge coming out of these pilot programs that will be very important for consolidating the work of RED in the future. One element of protecting forests that also has been in the media the last few days is the discussion on conservation versus sustainable use and commercial use of forest. I think it's important to remember that the carbon incomes from RED will not by themselves be enough to make conservation of forests more profitable than the alternatives that are found in forest conversion, cultivation, and so on. So we think incomes to forest communities will need to come from a variety of sources. Sustainable extraction of forests is therefore, in my opinion, an important element to make the economic case for RED to be a possible choice for countries and communities. The focus on green growth opportunities include the commercial opportunities that are found in wood and non-wood forest products. We've just heard the second game in town, as Pat called it, the flag tea. And the power of flag tea, I think, comes from the fact that the countries find it important to get economic benefits from their forests. And if done in the correct manner, as developed through the flag tea partnerships, countries will also make money from while conserving their forests. One observation of the team that I think will be very valuable for developing the plans for the coming years is the recognition that many countries will need more time than initially anticipated before they can participate fully in the results-based funding scheme. This is particularly the case for a number of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Tanzania is a case study of the current report, and the findings from there illustrate the importance of institutional strength and political leadership. Many countries in Africa have weak institutions and have political leaderships with different agendas than we have in the climate and forest work. So Tanzania, while having done a lot of the necessary preparatory work, is reported by this report to have shown a weaker leadership politically and institutionally to take those steps necessary into formalizing the results in the form of policy decisions and establishment of formal institutions for RED. The good news, actually, only from last week, is that one of the key decisions that we have been waiting for in Tanzania, the establishment of a national carbon monitoring center, has finally been formalized. This could have taken place 4 years ago, but we're happy to see that it now has materialized. I think the evaluation team has underreported some of the achievements of Tanzania in the current report, but at the same time they have pointed to a big challenge that reflects the differences between the RED countries. their ability to conform to the global requirements that are set up for RED. Some of the poorer countries in Africa are decades behind Brazil and Indonesia in their institutional strength. So one point I want to make is that we need to develop a strategy that also covers the weaker group of RED countries. Norway is a global leader in RED, and countries are looking to Norway to contribute also in this regard. A very high number of countries, maybe 50 countries, have been assisted in developing their RED programs through the UN RED and the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. And many of them are coming through the initial programs, and they don't see much at the end of the tunnel. There's no mechanism waiting for them. They are not ready to contribute fully in results-based. So with this high number of RED countries who are in the weaker end of the scale, we face a two-pronged risk. And one, of course, is that they may become disappointed and they can become negative and spoilers to the RED debate. But we also risk losing out on very important forest countries, and we may not be able to influence the level of deforestation in those countries. Of course, the key forest basins of the world are the core of the program. But if we look at Africa, for example, missing out on the poor group of countries with weak institutions, we may miss out on up to 3/4 of the deforestation taking place in Africa. So we need to have a certain focus on that as a part of our future strategy. So, finally, among the messages that I take home from this very good evaluation is that we have done a lot of things right, and we should be very proud about that. We should develop a revised strategy, a stronger management system for the initiative. We should plan for the case that developing RED as a global mechanism and for countries to get ready to participate takes more time than we have thought at the outset. We should firm up our work with the multilateral institutions and help them find their special roles in RED in the future. We should work closely with other donor countries. We should develop a strategy for the weaker range of developing countries, typically the poorer group in sub-Saharan Africa. We should continue the big share of funding that is passed through civil society. And I think we should continue the support to RED-related research, in particular for our partner countries, to make sure they develop the ability to establish sound national programs. We should work more closely with the private sector. This has been mentioned by others. Communication has been good, but we should develop a more aggressive strategy to communicate at the global level, which we may have focused too much on the domestic audience in this regard. Finally, we should strengthen our work on gender, which has been good in some of the projects, but there are a number of good reasons to do this, and one of them I'd like to say is that because women have a key role in forest management in many of our partner countries, the strong involvement of women is crucial for the success of reducing deforestation. I think that's a challenge that we have to pick up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ivar. And again, Ivar is part of managing the portfolio at NORAD. And now we're going to take a step out of the management people, and I'm very eager to hear what Arild Engelsen has to say. He has spent a lot of thought and research on RED since the start. So it's your time to sum up and take a bit of reflection. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess an evaluation report has two objectives. One is to be positive, so those who order it can say, yes, this is good, and also be critical, so it can be credible. So they can say what every politician learned on day one of the communication course, yes, it's very good, but it can be even better. I think this report fulfills it, and I'm sure in a presentation of the report you need most people to say that this is very good, and then you need to add a researcher to provide the critical remarks that can make the positive conclusions credible. So that's my role here. Perhaps I will also modify some of that. I'm partly going to say a bit about the report and itself, and also some of the biases that may be included, and then a few topics that I picked out and would like to comment more on. We should be proud. Don't be shy. There's a lot of good success stories to be told we heard. And we like to hear success stories, because RED is another chapter in the book Norway Saves the World. So it contributes to our good image of saving the world, being the world champions in a number of things. I'm not sure I agree. I think we should be shy and modest. I think for a lot of things we have much more to learn, and it's a general comment both in RED and other areas that I'm kind of seeing too much overconfidence in Norwegian solutions. So yes, be proud, but learn from others. The other thing I didn't expect to see it in the report, but I think it's important that we know the filtering of the conclusions that come out and the creation of success stories, is that RED has a very strong political function in Norway, and it is a political offset. It serves for former and current to say that it's a lot more effective to cut emissions in the Amazon than stop drilling oil in the north of Norway. So it is a political offset, so we can say, yes, we are doing a lot to save the environment. And therefore, we need to have the success stories in order not to let climate policy not be too problematic for our domestic policies. And I think the question is, can we say that these 10, soon 20 billion kroner has reduced emissions, as we hear constantly? Can we say that? And based on this report, the answer is no. I don't think this is an impact assessment report, and perhaps it was not meant to be. This is the evaluation report. It's what we call forensic storytelling. It's the stories of, I have to get the number right, 268 people, half of them in governments in Norway and the south, about 100 from civil society organizations. And these stories are generally positive, but in a way it's not to be expected, particularly as the report says that, let me quote, there is a growing perception that the main beneficiaries will be the multilateral institutions and large civil society organizations. They don't argue against this perception, so I guess you agree a little bit with that. So if these are basically happy people, happy to disperse money and happy to receive money, you wouldn't expect a lot of critical. It may not be untrue what they are saying, but I'm saying there are filters and biases in the sample that we should be aware of. So that's the first point. The second is that what this report says is about processes, about inputs, about activities, rather than results. And I wished it was a more critical reflection on that results in terms of reduced emissions, in terms of reduced poverty, it's not explicitly discussed. But it is a hope and a belief that if you have good processes, then it will also yield good results. So for example, just to take an example here, from page 68 is saying that the Jane Goodall Institute in Tanzania disbursed $200,000 to the target communities, and it was spent on school classrooms, teacher houses, and village offices. So, housing for teachers, will that reduce deforestation? Will it reduce poverty except for the teachers? We don't know. The same for civil society organizations, 820 million dispersed. Will it contribute to the goals? I mean, the web page is good, and I've used it. I've checked who's getting the money. 70% of those organizations are based in the West. Of course, some of them are international, but it's not mainly to the organization, civil society in the countries themselves. It also includes universities in the US, like Princeton, getting 14 million. So some critical reflection on how a good web page, how a good process on distributing will actually lead to that results. I wished it was more of that in the report. Has it worked? Again, in Brazil, which is kind of the shining case where deforestation has been reduced by 70 to 80% since 2004, is a good case in point. But most of that, almost all of it, happened before the Norwegian money came on the table. And there is a difference between the stories you hear in Brazil and the stories, or when you read international articles in scientific journals, and the stories you hear about Norway's contribution. I don't think Norway's played a negative role, but it's also find it hard for Norway to take a lot of credit for it. Indonesia, as we said, is probably a lot more for the good developments that you have seen at the political level there. The problem with Indonesia is that we haven't seen any reductions so far in actual deforestation. They want a theory of change in the report, and that I think is a good proposal and have a more systematic framework. I wish the report also could say a little what type of theory of change, because almost all social science theories are theories of change. And to rephrase Clinton, the basic theory of change in red is this: it's the incentives stupid. But there are other theories of change. Is the local right stupid, or is the governance stupid? So it would be interesting also that if the report could come up with some recommendation of what exactly kind of theories do they have in mind for this. I mean, some of what they refer to is more the personal motivation for bureaucrats, but I think you also need to go beyond kind of having well-motivated bureaucrats in ministries in the south is necessary to have the change, but it's also red was intended to make more the fundamental, deeper structural changes. What I miss would be maybe another type of framework, which is a framework to assess results and to learn more systematically from the red experience. Per Fredrik says that we have enough research, what we need to synthesize. I'm not sure I agree. Of course, as a researcher, I should always say we need more research, but I have more than enough on red research, so it's not for my sick mother. But I think also some good work. Did it work? Did the projects, this good scientifically based impact assessment of local projects is still missing, I think. There is a lot of self-evaluations, and of course it's interesting to listen to, but it's not always the best way to get the objective assessment. So some of the systematic and critical collection of experience and work and a framework for that, which also includes data collection, would be one of my proposals in addition to this theory of change. Another one I think both the NICFI and the report could have dealt with is really the theory of, the economic incentives and the design of the mechanism. It has a very interesting statement, finding 43, saying that result-based finance has acted as a political motivator rather than an economic incentive, which I think is maybe true, although I'm not sure what it means, but at least my interpretation I think is a good point. But it's also, I think it would be elaborate. If the economic incentive is not the key, it's just to throw big checks on the table of politicians, that's what leads to change. It means that the design of the mechanism is less important. And maybe you don't need to spend $4 billion to Brazil as we did last year, 4 billion kroner in 2013 to Brazil to motivate them. It's a very expensive way to motivate people if it's not the economic incentive that is the key. So that's an interesting point I would like if you could elaborate. Let me conclude that I think the basic idea of red is sound, and I have support, and that I've argued with kind of to that RED is a good idea and that we should push forward with the initial idea, which in my view was to have performance or result-based payments and also choose a national approach rather than having a lot of project islands that may change something in isolated locations but not overall. And I also clearly see that climate change is real and RED and reduced deforestation and degradation needs to be part of that. But because it's so important, we need also to ask some of these critical and more fundamental questions, how to make it as good as possible. And for this report, to summarize the two things we'd like to see more of is have an evaluation and assessment discussion of the results, not just activities and processes, and have the faith that they automatically produce the good results we want, and also on the design of the mechanism, how we are doing that. For example, I worked a bit on reference level, which is critical for defining what is an emission reductions. At the same time, you may dilute mechanisms so much if you set reference levels so high that success and payment is guaranteed, whatever you do. Thank you.